She is fantastic. She's a wonderful mother. She's an amazing advocate for her children. I'd love to hear her talk. I'm really excited she can be here today, and so I'd love to welcome Carol to come and present to us.
I'm going to pull it down, and you tell me, can you hear me?
Yes.
And more importantly, can you understand me? Because I know I have this accent that may not be familiar. I am so honored to be here today and share my family's story with their full permission. You need to know, regardless of the stories I tell you, they totally approved it. It's kind of important. Brenda asked me to speak about hope. So I did what I do, and I opened the dictionary and I looked to see what Mr. Webster says about hope. He defines it as the ability to cherish a desire with anticipation. We just kind of wrap our minds around that for a minute. Cherishing a desire with anticipation. In 1996, a doctor held up 3 fingers and told my husband and I the baby we were expecting was actually 3. And we were a little shocked and scared, and that's a whole story in itself, but I will tell you that I was full of anticipation. I was full of wonder that I was going to have this whole party, and what that would look like. A few months later, when I was already in labor at 19 weeks, I'll have to tell you that my anticipation became a little tainted with fear. I still was eager to be a mother, and I still was cherishing that desire, but the fear had seeped in and was affecting me a bit. And on April 18th, 1997, when my teeny tiny triplets were born at 28 weeks, hope came to life for me in their faces in the isolette. Those little tiny faces, I began to let my anticipation soar as I wondered what these little humans would be and what they would accomplish. So many of you who've lived it can probably nod along with me that the days in the NICU were at once some of my most vivid memories. I can be transported back there in a flash. They're also a complete blur. I would be hard-pressed to not sob if I had to talk about those. The fact of the matter is, I'd been on bed rest for over 10 weeks. I had lost the ability to stand on my own. I had lost a lot of blood. I was very sick and very weak. And then there were these beautiful babies who were on a ton of machines and oxygen and things that I knew nothing about. And I was scared to death. And yet, my babies began to teach me about hope. I would kangaroo care with them every single day. Are you familiar with that? Strip them down to their little diapers. I would button them up in my shirt. It felt like a very tangible way to mother these children that I wasn't taking home with me every night. And I did everything in birth order. For 20 years, I've done everything in birth order, which is Benjamin, then Mason, then Claire. So one day I walked into the NICU and went straight to Benjamin, and his nurse, who was not his normal nurse, met me there, and she said, "Can't hold him today. His heart's racing, he's tachycardic, and it wouldn't be healthy for you to hold him." And then she went on to another child in the NICU, and I opened his little isolette window, and I put my hand in, and I said, "What are you doing to Mommy? You know, I just want to hold you, and I need to hold you. What are you doing?" And as I stood there, I looked, and not one monitor had an abnormal number. It was completely normal. And so I stood there for several minutes, and finally I went to find his nurse, because there's a desperate need, right, in that NICU to hold our babies. So I went to find the nurse, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? He is not tachycardic. His numbers are normal. I want to hold him." But guess what? He was tachycardic. His numbers were racing. So she's standing there, and I put my hand, and I'm like, "Benjamin, show her that you're normal." And so she said, oops, I'm going to go back. She said, "Get your hand out of there and don't open your mouth." So I said, "Very nice." So I pulled my hand out, and she put her hand in, and his numbers were racing all over the chart. And she silently took her hand in and pointed at me, and I put mine in, and his numbers all came to normal. We did this for several minutes, this back and forth with no words. Finally, she threw open the isolate. She goes, just take him. It is clear he wants you anyway. That baby boy was probably 3 pounds, maybe a little under 3 pounds. He was barely 2 weeks old, and he was already giving me hope that I was his mom, and he knew it. 2 months later, when I had all 3 babies home from the hospital, I allowed my hope to soar. I allowed my anticipation to grow about who they would be and what they could do. I felt like it was safe and that I could do that. But I was wrong. At 9 months old, only 1 of our 3 could sit up. At 12 months, only 1 could crawl. By 15 months, only 1 could walk. My daughter. By 2 years, the doctors had diagnosed both our boys with cerebral palsy. We'd actually received an earlier diagnosis right around their first birthday. I'm just going to say that doctor was severely lacking in bedside manner. He was gruff and coarse, and his words hurt that day. I'm not going to lie, I had a hard time finding hope in his office, and so I began to search for it. I just wanted him to give me a crumb, just a little crumb of hope. And so I explained, Benjamin has strabismus, his eyes crossed very badly, and this is after surgery. And the physical therapist had been telling me for months, once he has his strabismus surgery, he's going to reach across midline, and he is going to start reaching milestones. And so I had begun to put all my hope, right? Every anticipation on that. That surgery was going to be the end-all, be-all for my child. And so I told this doctor, but the physical therapist says, once his strabismus is cured, right? And he looked at me, he goes, ma'am, you knew when I walked in here I was going to diagnose these boys with cerebral palsy. I'm not sure what you were looking for. He offered no hope. He gave me no hope. But let me tell you what Dr. Bad Bedside Manner did that day. He lit a couple of fires that he didn't intend to. The first fire was inside my husband, who was in the middle of his medical training, and he decided that he had to go onto the front lines and he needed to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. That it was going to be imperative for him to be with families who were like ours, who were faced with this diagnosis. And while he may not be the one who always gives the diagnosis, he is an orthopedic surgeon, like Hank said. He often is, and he wanted to be there, and he wanted to use what we had not had, and to be the one to offer the hope. The second fire that doctor lit was inside me. And I vowed that day, and even as I talked to family members who wanted to call and console us that afternoon, my vow that day was that my job had not changed. These children were the same with that diagnosis as they'd been the day before without it, and my job was to knock down every wall and every barrier and to be their cheerleader until I drew my last breath for them to reach their full potential. My days were filled with the sweetest smiles. Cutest little heads that popped up when I walked in to the room, and very little time to do anything else, even, shower. It was a little busy in our house. Denial is a strong force, and I camped out there for a while. We had been told that if the boys could sit independently for a minute by the time they were a year old, they would walk. They're doing a good job. Claire likes to believe that when she moved, they fell over. She wasn't even touching them, so it was totally little. I worked every day. We worked every day. I would get Benjamin in a seated position, and I would count like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? And then I would try to convince Wade. I got him to sit for a minute, right? Can you hear me? I was trying to manufacture hope that nobody could give me because nobody knew what a prognosis looked like for my children. Okay, you just take in this picture. We were part of a multiple moms group in Chicago, and this sweet mom further down the road had given me this cute little riding thing. I mean, that is kind of awesome. And it was great for occupational therapy because it had all these little things you had to move on the panel. And so Mason is strapped in, he's safe, he's having his turn. Claire had already had a turn, I promise, and she didn't need occupational therapy. And she kept going and getting in his lap. And I would move her, baby, you've already had your turn, it's brother's turn, and I would move her, and second time she goes and she gets in his lap, and the third time she went to get in his lap, he wraps his little arms around her waist and looks at me like, I want her. So it's my picture that reminds me everything's not about cerebral palsy or therapy, right? Sometimes it's about playing with your sister, and Mason certainly taught me that. The triplets were about this age when one of my girlfriends brought me a magazine and had an article about a doctor. Could have been about Justin, who spoke to us earlier today, but this article was about Dr. Jan Brunstrom, who is a doc in Dallas, the Dallas area, and she has cerebral palsy. I tell you, I didn't know her name. I didn't recognize her name. I wasn't in this world yet. I ripped that article out, and I probably carried it around, folded up in my purse for a decade. It went everywhere I went because I could take it out, and it was a tangible, hold it in my hand reminder that my children had a bright future. And so on my dark days, I pulled that article out and thought, we just have to keep at it. We have to keep at it because this does not define them. This is not the sum total of who they are, what they can be. The preschool years were filled with microanalyzing. We microanalyzed every single step they took, every milestone, every movement, every struggle. We were about this age when sweet little Claire, I get called to the teacher's office when they're in third grade, 3-year-old preschool, and they're like, Claire doesn't share. I'm like, Claire, my Claire? Like, I was fairly certain they had the wrong mother. I'm like, my Claire doesn't share. They're like, yeah, it's a problem. I'm like, she's been sharing since she was in the womb. Like, that's not a thing. She doesn't know how to not share. The teacher said, well, she sits with her legs in a V in front of her brothers, and she keeps their toys in her legs so that none of the other children can get them. Like, that is not called not sharing. That is called taking care of her brothers, and she's never going to get in trouble for that. Not ever. So they were kind of the light of my world. I thought they were pretty much the most amazing kiddos on the planet. I wanted a miracle, though. I wanted them to move. I wanted them to groove. I wanted them to meet their milestones, and I kept waiting for it. But by 3 years old, we knew we were facing long-term disabilities. Mason, who has the little red cuff crutches, had been using a little walker since he was about 18 months old. He was eager to move and groove. Claire was his driving force. Everything she did, he wanted to do, and he worked at it. Benjamin had absolutely zero desire. He liked to sit in my lap and be loved. He liked to give love. He would hug you and kiss you if you came into the room. He did not care if he moved or not. But at about 3, he started using the little walker as well. I wouldn't allow the physical therapist to use the word wheelchair in their presence at this age. I called it the W word, and I thought it was a foul word. It was a horrible language. It was bad, and I didn't want it spoken. In my mind, and I think we alluded to that earlier, it was an indicator that this was not something that was going away. It meant, in my mind, that we were giving up. In my mind, it meant limitations and restrictions and a disability for life. And I didn't want to discuss it. So Benjamin kept using his walker. I want you to listen to me, because when I tell you he was using it, what I mean is I would put that walker down and I would put him in it, and I would say, go. And 15 minutes later, we would arrive at the preschool class or the event or wherever we were going with an exhausted child who needed a nap. It's about this time that we were at physical therapy, and the therapist was working on getting Benjamin to transition from his stroller, which he was still using, to his walker, and she had prodded and cajoled and begged, and he had scooted his little bottom out, and he had finally gotten in the walker, but he was backwards. So she said to him, she said, Benjamin, what are we going to do? How are you gonna get in this walker right? And he looked at her without missing a beat and said, well, I guess I'll do the hokey pokey and turn myself around. It was the day I realized that I was raising a kid who was bright and clever and hilarious, and I was making him enter every room, every event, completely exhausted. He couldn't shine. because I was making him be worn out and completely tired before he ever got there. I knew it was the moment to start talking about a wheelchair. When we went to try one out, my sweet boy, who's very intuitive, Benjamin is like a barometer. He knows every mood I ever have. I can't hide it. He looked up at me and said, "I don't need this, I walk." And I wanted to agree and scoop him up, and I wanted to leave. But guess what? He saw the joystick on that wheelchair. And what is that? He just wanted to try that. It looked really cool to him. I have to tell you that when he realized he could use that cool new joystick to drive and navigate his own world and still talk, it was the happiest day of his life. What I had seen as limitations and as restrictions and as a negative thing was the most positive thing that could ever happen to this child. What I saw as holding him back is exactly what set him sail. 2 days later, after getting his first wheelchair, he went to timeout for the first time. We were in the hospital for physical therapy, and I'm herding cats, right? I have 2 boys and a girl who were all trying to get to the therapist, and Benjamin disappears. And we can't find him. The therapists are looking. I'm looking. The nurses are looking in the hospital. Benjamin was going door to door. He thought the patients needed to be cheered up. My little troublemaker was 5 years old, and he was still teaching me about hope. By the first grade, we thought we had all the things figured out, right? We are some smart parents. We're very educated. We knew how to use ramps, and we knew how to use vans, and I, of course, was celebrating this cool wheelchair with the joystick. And about the middle of the semester, Benjamin started having a crisis at school. He needed a restroom break that was at an apparent inopportune time for the teacher. So his aide would come get him and take him to the restroom. But she took a really long time to clean up and get him back to class, and Benjamin didn't want to miss class. So he was like, "No big deal. I'll drive myself back to class. I don't need you to do that." Except that his teacher closed the door. She didn't want it open. Benjamin couldn't get in the door, so he devised this plan where he took that little tray on his wheelchair and he'd just ram it right into the door. And so it was knocking, right? I thought it was kind of brilliant. His friends would hear him, they'd get up, they'd come let him in. I was pretty proud of him. He came up with it all on his own. Teacher, not so proud. She was very stern one day. Did I do that? How do I do that? Sorry. She was very stern one day, and she pulled me aside when I got there to pick him up, and she was, "Look, you and Benjamin are going to have to come up with something different. This is not an okay solution." Well, I was kind of human. It was first grade, though, and I'm still getting my mama hat on. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we handle this? These are my first children. And so I'm processing it internally, and we leave, but I am just getting madder by the hour as the evening wears on. So by the time I get the triplets to bed, and I hear Benjamin crying, I'm like, of course he's crying. This teacher is from the devil. I mean, she has stolen his hope. She's killing his dreams. And I'm going to have to go deal with her tomorrow. I mean, I was pretty much fit to be tied. So I go into little Benjamin, the triplets room. I kneel down beside Benjamin's little bed, and I'm like, "Baby, what is it?" He says, "Mama, I'm worried." I said, "I know," right? Because I knew what he was worried about. I said, "What is it, sweetheart?" "Mama can fix it," right? Because we can fix anything. "I can fix it. Tell me." He said, "Mom, I am worried that when I get elected President of the United States, they're not going to let you live in the White House with me." Oh, that teacher did not steal Benjamin's hope. She did not steal his dreams. I assured him that if he would win, he gets elected president, I can live wherever he wants me to live. When the triplets were in second grade, we moved to Dallas, Texas for Wade to do a fellowship. And Benjamin was assigned to this wonderful lady's classroom. Cindy Ramsdale is her name. She is so worthy of this slide, all her own. Because she was completely different than our first grade teacher. She rearranged the classroom so that Benjamin could get anywhere and everywhere he wanted to go. And then she rearranged her schedule so that inopportune bathroom break that none of the rest of her class needed to do, they did anyway. Because it was the time when Benjamin needed to go. And she knew he didn't want to miss class. The truly remarkable thing that she did, she kicked all the adults out of the class. And she began to set up a system that told the other students, now listen, if you finish your work early, you get to be Benjamin's secretary. Did you hear it? It was a reward. If they finished their work, they got to help Benjamin. Can you imagine? My kid thought he was the king of that classroom. And the other students did too. There were second graders. The teacher said it, that it must be a reward worthy to be grabbed, right? Benjamin learned that year that he could make friends with his peers, not just adults. Because he'd been surrounded by adults his whole life, he could talk to them all day long. He learned that year he could talk to his friends. He also learned that he could do all the schoolwork that his other friends did. Cindy Ramsdale in Dallas, Texas, gave our entire family hope. Benjamin rolls into a classroom or a room, and eyes turn. People look at him. When he speaks, people listen. He was part of a teen government panel when he was 15, and he actually did run for president. And I got to the convention center. There were over 500 young people in the convention hall, and I'm standing outside, and I hear this huge roar of celebration. And unbeknownst to me, the celebration was that my son had just won his primary as presidential candidate. His dreams aren't broken. They were never broken. He never lost hope. He is still cherishing with anticipation what tomorrow looks like. Today, see all that facial hair? That's because he's a junior in college. And I've lost the ability to force him to shave it. He's 20 years old. He's majoring in theater and with an emphasis in dramatic writing. He has added a second major in political science because politics in America are sad, and he thinks he gets to get involved. We drove over 1,000 miles this summer because Benjamin decided that the gubernatorial election in the state of Virginia, which is very far from our home, needed his participation, and he worked for weeks trying to help get the candidate he believes is the best for the special needs world elected. His dreams are still alive. Maybe I'll get to live in the White House one day after all. Mason was 5 when he had his selective dorsal rhizotomy. The recovery required him to use a wheelchair for a while, and then a little walker, and before he could build up his strength to use his power sticks again. That's what we call his crutches. That's kind of, crutch is an ugly word for a 3-year-old, and so we renamed them at our house. So in the first day of school, his teacher had them draw a self-portrait, and he's telling me about it on the ride home, and of course I'm driving, I can't look in his backpack, but I'm anxious to know how my Mason in this recovery season identifies himself. So I said, Mason, did you draw yourself with your power sticks? And he said, no. I said, oh, well, did you draw yourself with your walker? And he said, no. And so I'm thinking, wow, he started to identify himself in his wheelchair. And I paused, and before I could ask him another question, he goes, Mom, I drew myself with nothing, like I'll walk in heaven. That's my kid. Mason doesn't lack hope. He doesn't lack anticipation for his future. He understands courage. He understands how to conquer the hard stuff. When he lays down his crutches to help, he's an RA in his dorm in college, and so he feels very passionate about walking other people through the hard days of freshman year. When he lays down his crutches to do that, people take notice and they listen. He's majoring in all the things. He's majoring in anthropology and Latin and Greek. I don't even know. He wants to go on to grad school, possibly seminary. He wants to be able to minister. He spent his summer in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico doing a Mayan archaeological dig. Hope is not something he lacks. When he was a freshman in college, he was part of a service team to a home for HIV patients. He called me when the service project was over. He was very emotional. And he said, Mom, we walked in there, this group of college kids, and these HIV patients just kind of looked at us a little bit leery, right? You know, what are these college kids coming in here for? He said, and then they saw me. And one by one, they began to come up to me and ask me my story. So my very emotional 18-year-old says, it was the first time in my life I realized my crutches are going to open doors for me that might not have been opened otherwise. A group of HIV patients gave Mason hope for his future. Mason gives me hope. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you the triplet sister, the one who spread her legs and said, no, these are my brother's toys and you can't take them, is passionate about ministering to the marginalized, the hurting, the special needs community as a whole. She's majoring in Spanish with plans to go to occupational therapy school because she thinks there are entire populations of children like her brothers who need her. There are entire populations of families like ours who need the hope she can offer. All right, so when the triplets were 8, Wade and I had another baby because 3 just wasn't enough. This is my Kate. She's 11 today. When she was 4, someone asked her name, and she said, I'm Kate, I'm a gift. Which is so true, but I kind of decided I better dial that down just a little bit. Everybody might not agree. Kate has been a light in our dark days when surgeries loom, and we have had so very many surgeries. And grief raises its ugly head. She has been a constant distraction. She's brought us silly and fun and love. She was 3 the first time she was in the vicinity to hear somebody make fun of her brother. Said that Benjamin was weird, and I called her little fist as she grabbed him by the shirt and she was about to punch him. She said, he's not weird, he has cerebral palsy. She was going to take him out. I prevented that. If you look at the big picture, she has found a way to channel that aggression. She's playing on the boys' football team at her 5th and 6th grade school. She said, Mama, please tell him I'm playing football. She is a gift of hope to us. I did it again, didn't I? Thank you. I want you to hear me. I love sharing my story, but what I want you to hear is that we can cherish our dreams for our kids with anticipation. Cerebral palsy does not stop our hope. Do you hear me? If you want to take this picture as a tangible reminder, please snap it. I needed something to hold for more than a decade that said I could hope. I want you to have hope. What I want you to hear is that day when Benjamin was 15 and he was running for president of that mock election, there was a debate. And I snuck in the back because I'm the mom. I had to hear. They asked him, if we could give you a magic pill today, candidate Shrader, would you take it if it cured cerebral palsy? With 500 teenagers hanging on his every word, Benjamin said no. My cerebral palsy makes me who I am. I would not take a magic pill. I asked him afterwards in the privacy of our home, were you just trying to get elected? Because I'm going to, really, what's the answer to that question? If I could give you a pill, would you take it? This is his answer, and I want you to listen. Don't know who I would be without cerebral palsy, and I like who I am. I wouldn't change a thing. If you hear nothing else I've said, hear the voice of this kid who is articulate and knows how to say what he's feeling and thinking and doesn't pull a punch. He wouldn't change a thing. Thank you.